Yeah, I was like literally listening to your like talk at like for like Salesforce back then. We are live, by the way. Hi Sunil, welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes. Quick shout out to your lovely wife for an intro. She is like the best. And then I feel like she has like my dream career. And yeah, she's just like amazing woman who is like a past guest on our show. Why don't we start with like your career journey? Like, so you started your career as like a financial risk developer, and fast forward to today, you started your own company. Your most recent job was like a chairman from at Salesforce. Why don't we talk about like what were some core lessons that uh you've learned early on in your career kind of shape you into who you are today?
Yeah, wow, I haven't heard the financial risk developer one for a while because it was like
Yeah,
it
it
was
was
actually an internship.
the
Yeah, no, I
OG.
love it. I love it. But it was an awesome role. Like I got to so I was a physics major at the University of Waterloo, and it
Mhm,
was like it was essentially like a quant role, and I didn't
mhm,
know anything about finance at the time, so that was an opportunity to take all the computational science and physics
mhm,
stuff and apply it to like portfolio risk management basically. So I
mhm,
was helping that company like build risk models in Python,
mhm,
I remember, and I was working really closely with the leader of that business unit. So that was like a cool experience to
mhm,
apply programming to like a real kind of business scenario and use
mhm,
some of the more complex math to like learn from. But yeah, that was like early days. My first real job out of school was at SAP, and I think
mhm,
that was kind of the founding. Hey, like enterprise software is probably the place that I'm going to live and grow up.
mhm,
So that was my first job out of school, and I started my career as a software engineer, and I was working on building product that was industry focused. So it was actually product for the CPG vertical.
mhm,
I didn't know anything about CPG at the time, just to be clear.
mhm,
Like, I came out of school programming, like, great. Now I'm learning a new language,
mhm,
which felt ancient because SAP was coding in a language called ABAP. And when you come out of university, you're on the bleeding edge, and then you go back and you're like, "Holy crap, this is what the business world is using."
mhm,
Uh, but then very quickly, kind of learned that. Did that for 3 years, and I had an opportunity when I was at SAP to be customer facing. So I got
mhm,
deployed. Everyone talks about forward deployed engineers right now, and it's like all the rave. But back
mhm,
then, what you would do is like I was in the development org. We released a new capability, which was the latest enhancement pack on the CRM application, and only the engineers knew this stuff. So they would take some engineers and deploy them at the
mhm,
customer that's going through an implementation. So I would say like it was kind of like your forward deploy engineer back in the day, right? So it's like I got the opportunity to do that, and I was at the customer site helping them kind of do the implementation, working with some consultants. I really liked that job, and I really like being in front of the customer. So I switched from engineering to consulting, and
mhm,
then I was on rotating projects with many big companies, specifically CPG companies, and I got to really understand the business requirements and what the software is actually solving. So I did that for a few years, and what was cool about that experience was you got to travel a lot. I
mhm,
also met Angelique, my wife, during that time frame, so we traveled a lot together,
mhm,
which is awesome. Um, but the travel became a lot. I remember at one point I was in Toronto. I was doing like 2 weeks in Toronto, 2 weeks in Shanghai, and I kept
mhm.
doing that for like months on end, and it was not a
That's
sustainable
crazy.
lifestyle.
The flights are like very it's like just like literally 15 hour of flying. Well, like technically 12, but still like I feel like the travel to the airport and stuff, that's crazy.
It was not fun. So by the time you got over your jet lag, you came back home,
Mhm,
and then you just kept like ping ponging. But it was cool because I got to work with a lot of global teams,
mhm,
especially at large multinationals, and
mhm,
doing very complex rollouts. Right, like these are like 250 million plus euro projects,
mhm,
right, that were being
mhm,
deployed. And it was great to be the solution architect on that. So a lot of
mhm,
experience, kind of doing the post sale customer implementation, customer success thing.
mhm,
And then in 2015, I got the opportunity to switch from SAP to Salesforce, partially because I wanted to stop the travel, but mostly because I wanted to do something new.
mhm,
And that's when I joined the pre-sale side for the first time. So
mhm,
I got to be an SE in the Toronto office in Salesforce, and that was a fun new experience because at the time the technology was very different than what I was doing at SAP, and it was super easy to configure and implement it. So
mhm,
every demo you would do as an SE was like a 70% configured, ready to go system. Like you could hand it
mhm,
to a consultant and they could finish the rest of it. So it was really cool because you really believed in the product and you're kind of, helping customers see how they could get value out of it. So I did that for a little while, and I think that was like 2 years. And then I switched to the industry business unit at Salesforce, because at that time they were starting to say, hey, let's go hard on verticals, right? And I had the vertical experience from SAP. So CPG became the natural home for me. And then I joined the team and kind of helped them scale the go-to-market across all regions. And most recently, I took the role of a GM for a product. So we launched a consumer goods specific product, and I was the GM of that product till I left in 2023. And that was a cool experience, because you basically launch a product within the company and then you grow it within the company. And then 2023, we started Tribble, which has been its own. It feels like 10 years since 2023. So,
For sure,
yeah,
it is. Yeah.
version.
I wonder. So okay, so like when I saw your resume, I was just like really curious about like what is the consumer goods segment for Salesforce? Is like Salesforce more like selling to consumer goods companies, and then like you're building like a specific sales or like go to market product for that specific community?
Yeah, so it's literally taking the platform and building a data model that is for that industry, right? So I think any vertical software, a lot of the time you're kind of taking something off the shelf and configuring it. With vertical software, it's more out of the box, if you will. With consumer goods specifically, if you think about the grocery store that you go shop, all the products in there are from CPG companies, but there's a whole supply chain of how it gets from the CPG company to the shelf. And there's a whole bunch of business process on how they manage that, getting the product shipped, getting it sold, incentives, discounts. So having software that helps the manufacturer manage that process is what we were building. But I think the same thing applies for anything, right? Like health, life sciences, financial services. If you can be more out of the box for that industry, then you're not paying consultants to build the custom version of it on top of your platform.
For sure. I wonder, okay, maybe we could talk about like Tribble, and how do you kind of like identify the problem from Salesforce to like actually started building the product? Obviously, you guys have like some amazing clients like Salesforce, Abridge, or Unipath.
Yeah, I think a lot of Grace, what informed, I would say, the first iterations of the product and even just the vision for the company was experience that I had across all these different roles and different companies. I think for us, what was very clear is knowledge work, is becoming is being disrupted, right? So we know that some of the challenges that we had 5 years ago, where you don't have enough domain experts in the company. Like even for me, when I was building this deep industry product, I had the only 2 people in the entire company that would answer a complete CPG RFP end to end for that deep business process. And it's because it's such a complicated process. Not everyone is going to know that, right? And it became very obvious that kind of knowledge needs to scale efficiently. And obviously, with ChatGPT launching and LLMs becoming more mainstream, like that's an obvious kind of outcome. Like, how do you scale this knowledge? So the thesis was, hey, can we use a new way of building software to automate a lot of the workflows we've lived through, i.e., inception of product, customer interviews, collection of data, all the way through engineering, through go-to-market, through selling it, through post-sales and success. And like, if you look at that entire life cycle of software, how can you compress the time frame with which you can bring it to market, but also make the interdepartment kind of connections more efficient? And that was the big picture. And we kind of said, hey, like, what are the use cases we can launch first to go to the market? And in 2023, I remember we actually had on our website, it said, kiss your apps goodbye, say hello to agents. And at that time, it was like, no one knew what the hell an agent was. So we changed it very quickly. But the idea was, hey, like with this new type of software, you can tackle one use case first, get it right, build trust, and then you can rapidly build outward in a way that was not possible before. And for us, like the architecture we chose to do then from day one was, we always thought of the software as a digital teammate. Like there's a UX, but it sits on top of what is an agent service. And that allows us to more rapidly add capabilities beyond just the first or second or third use case. So that's kind of how the product was informed, Grace, from experience. But yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff. I mean, our customers are really driving our requirements, which has been great.
Totally. Do you want to showcase, like, do you want to do like a demo on the show, or like we can share screen, or like, I don't know, whatever you want.
You know what? It's on the fly, but I love doing demos, so I'm happy to do it. Here,
Love it.
I'll show you. I don't even know how. Oh,
Oh yeah, you can just like click on present,
share
and then it will
screen.
ask you.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let me quickly show you what this looks like. So a lot of what we do is in Slack.
Mhm.
Right? And we did this on purpose. So Slack and Teams has been kind of the interface that we've built a lot of this on.
Mhm.
And the purpose of that is, hey, like, let's bring the systems we're connected to on the back end to the user,
Mhm.
as opposed to having the user go out. I think we face this at every company, right? Like, you join, you get access to like 7 licenses in different systems, and you get instructions on how to log in and do work there. I think AI is going to blow all that up, because agents that are more and more capable will go into these systems and do some work for you. So our thesis is, hey, let's meet the users where they are. They're in Slack, right? They're in Teams. What can we bring into Slack that can allow them to do the work without them having to leave the system? And one of the things we've started doing is building out workflows on top of Tribble that allow the agent to go off and do work, whether it's going and pulling information, whether it's updating systems, or it's even creating content, right? And that's the way to think about what we're doing. It's really more of an automation platform that's emerged, and it can run kind of these agentic services in the background. So what I'm showing you here is the Tribble home screen, if you will. When you log in and you open up the Tribble app, these are the workflows that were configured in our system, but these are the kinds of pieces of work that Tribble can do, right? So as an example, and I'll show you this because I literally did this for a customer just a few minutes ago. I had a meeting with a prospect, and I was like trying to show them, like, hey, how do I prepare for this meeting with you? And here, I literally just said, I need an intro deck for this meeting. I'm with them, literally in the meeting with them right now. So what Tribble will do is it'll go through all the previously recorded calls that we have, all the content that we've uploaded for that industry, playbooks, all relevant information, and then it will put together a presentation and slides and output to me directly here, right? So here I'm seeing the output of it going in using our corporate template and creating some slides. And it's not going to get it right the first time, but I don't know if you're familiar with Lovable. Have you used it?
Oh yeah, I love Lovable. I feel like it's like, yeah, it takes a few tries, but like still, like it just like magical when it can like actually self-generate stuff.
One-shotting it is so hard, but that's the beauty of it. You can literally edit it directly here. We're calling it like Lovable for go-to-market teams, because you can essentially say, hey, I want to actually go and add this customer story slide and an example. So then it goes back and say, okay, let me rework the deck and let me make sure the narrative makes sense. And it comes back and it shows me like, hey, like, this is what it looks like. And in this case, it specifically came back with this customer story that came back from our database. And it also gave me an example from the HR industry. So we're trying to bring work to the user. And then in the background, we're also going to go back in and update the systems on behalf of the user too, right? So that's kind of really how we're thinking about it, is like, can we complete more of the work? And then building a more capable agent allows us to build workflows that are very complex, right? As opposed to trying to force the user into an interface. Yeah, there's the ad hoc demo.
I love it. I have a question on like the generation part. Like, so obviously there's like also other kind of like workflow tools, like, we have like the Fun of Clean on the show, as well as like there's like Writer. I feel like a lot of the companies are doing some sort of like similar-ish like internal tools. Like, how do you think about like differentiation, like go-to-market strategy for something like this? Obviously, like I think like you guys started like very early, though it's 2023, but I feel like 2023 feels like, the OG era slash like, like, yeah, it's just like I feel like in the AI world, every month is kind of like a year sometimes. Yeah, I wonder, how do you think about the differentiation between like all these other, I guess, like ChatGPT slash Lovable equivalent within internal company?
Yeah, I think, look, there is a crazy amount of innovation happening, and like we've never seen anything in our lives like this, right?
Mhm.
And it's exciting and
Mhm.
also a little bit nerving to see it. But I think for us, like we've always focused on go-to-market workflows, just because we
Mhm.
think it's the same conversation earlier on, right?
Mhm.
Verticalizing software more out of the box, right?
Mhm.
This is analogous to that. Can we focus on a person and a role
Mhm.
within a company, or a few roles, look at the jobs to be done of that person, and try to get as much of the end-to-end process done, right? I think there's so much general purpose tech. You've got all these like agent platforms that now
Mhm.
exist. You can go build, your own agents.
Mhm.
You can configure them to do things. Some of these are like digital workforce platforms, but the question is, how much of the job can they actually do? Like, what part of like human labor are they displacing?
Mhm.
Our perspective is, if you focus on a few roles, you can go a lot deeper. But there are investments that you need to make from a product perspective to make that happen, right?
Mhm.
As an example, when we think about Tribble, I always talk about the product in three kind of pillars, right? One is the brain, which is our all ingested data, but also
Mhm.
the knowledge graph that we create that's very unique to the workflows we support, and inferences that we can make from the data we're connected to, right? So if you think
Mhm.
about conversational data, like this recording as an example, it's
Mhm.
Grace, Sunil. What are the topics we're talking about? Sunil's babbling a lot. Grace is not speaking as much, but Grace is making comments about specific topics, and
Mhm.
Sunil's talking about specific topics. So how can I take all of that and distill it down to understanding truly what Sunil's good at and Grace is good at, and then
Mhm.
store that, right? And then do that across the entire company.
Mhm.
And how can I use that data later to fill holes in my understanding as Tribble, right?
Mhm.
As people use the platform. So I think
Mhm.
making investments to make the product better from that perspective and like a knowledge capacity is one piece that we're investing heavily in. And then second, the end-to-end workflows need to truly be end-to-end, right? Like it's got
Mhm.
to be actual work that's completed for it to be useful. I think like generative search is commoditized, right? It's easy. Like anybody can
Mhm.
stand up an app that does RAG. Like that's been doable for the last year. I think what's interesting now is how complex is the workflow that you can execute? What's the auditability, and how trustworthy is it, right? I think, will users actually believe that the work is being done? And I think you need to make investments to make that possible. Like you have to show the users your work. You have to give them interfaces for them to trust it.
Mhm.
So that's how we see it, right? Like we think about role specific, and each of the different functions in a company that requires slightly different investment, right? So I think it's the age old vertical versus general software.
Mhm. I wonder, so like, how do you think about which segment to target first, and then having the stickiness to like spread into the general universe? Obviously, I know that like you guys are focusing on like the sales teams, and like pre-sales team, and I wonder when you are thinking about it, like, how do you analyze the market, and then how do you analyze like which company to go after first?
We kind of let the market pull us into the first use case. So if you look
Mhm.
at what we were doing in 2023 when we launched the
Mhm.
product, we focused on RFP automation, because for us
Mhm.
that was the obvious first use case to build
Mhm.
trust with the customer. And we figured, if you can answer an RFP for a customer, then
Mhm.
you truly understand their business and how they want to position themselves with their clients.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, and if you get that right and you get enough customers using that, then you have this trusted brain, right, on which you
Mhm.
can build more things. And that's
Mhm.
what we call it, the brain. We're like, hey, like we
Mhm.
understand your company quite well. And if you add this additional data, we can then support these additional use cases. So
Mhm.
that's how we kind of came into the market. I don't think that that's the only vector. Like I'm sure there's other ways, and there's many other companies that have kind of approached it differently, but it's worked for us. And what's been really cool about that is most of our customers that use us, they love the product. They give us ideas on how to improve it, and then they naturally, like I was on a call yesterday with a customer, and she was excited to like expand the use cases now to the broader go to market teams, because they start using the product and then they have 1,001 ideas. And for us, it's always the balance of like which function does it make sense for us to actually more grow into, as opposed to like we're not touching that.
Mhm.
We've always thought about it as adjacent to go to market teams, right? So if you think about it, we focus on sales teams, but sales and customer success are deeply intertwined, right?
Mhm.
Post sales ecosystem, like if you think about partners that do the implementation, well, they're deeply intertwined with SEs and salespeople, right? So there's an opportunity to do more continuity and bridge the gap. So that's how we're thinking about it, right? Like we picked that initial vector, but now we have customers reaching out to us for broader sales use cases, and we'll also talk to the other go-to-market teams.
I wonder, so like when you are selling to like a Unipath or like Salesforce, obviously like Salesforce is your like previous organization, but like how do you think about who to sell it to? Like so for example, obviously like the testimonial is coming from like Unipath CMO, but like so like do you like directly try to like pull people from your network from a specific company to like, and then how do you think about like how much to charge? So obviously there's like the pricing strategy. Like you came to our conference and then like obviously all the like VCs were talking about like the people now try to charge by like productivity than per seat. And like how do you think about pricing your own product and how much budget does the company actually have and then how much they're actually like willing to kind of like implement into purchasing like a new AI tool within the organization?
Yeah, I think pricing in AI, it's talked about a lot. And, I
Mhm,
think, one of the things that I've benefited from in my career,
mhm,
once again, I'll go back to that CPG example, right? The product that we
mhm,
had built, it was highly sophisticated in that it was very deep in the business process. Specifically, it was
mhm,
called trade promotion management. Not a lot of people know what that means because it's also a
mhm,
very specific process.
mhm,
But in a company the size of like Procter and Gamble and Unilever, you don't have a large number of humans using that software, but they're managing a large, like billions of dollars of money through the
mhm,
software. So then you're in a conundrum, right? When you go to a small company, you've got the same number of humans managing maybe $10 million. And then you go to a
mhm,
big company, it's the exact same user count, but they're
mhm,
managing tens of billions of dollars. It's like two
mhm,
magnitudes of order
mhm,
bigger like amount of money and impact on the business.
mhm,
So what do? You can't do per seat, right? Because then your per
mhm,
seat is either too expensive or too little. So we kind of thought through models and came up with like this revenue based model at that time, which was interesting because it was very different than what Salesforce did from a
mhm,
pricing standpoint. So I explain all that because for us at Tribble, like one of the first things for us was very clear that you want to price on consumption. Like in a world where we're literally putting business cases in terms of like change in growth and headcount for a function, you probably don't want to tether yourself to headcount, right? From a
mhm,
pricing standpoint. So that was obvious. And then the second thing was like, what are the units that people want to pay for? Like we use the analogy of like Chuck E. Cheese and tokens, right? Like you get
mhm,
credits and then you can use the credits however you want in different games. But then you have to educate the customer on how games cost different credits, right? So you've got to figure
mhm,
out like what is the exchange rate, if you will, for what you're buying, and then how can you use it in different use cases. So I'll say like we haven't figured everything out yet, Grace, but one of the things we've learned through the last 2 years is
mhm,
make it stupid simple so that you don't have to like there's no reason to overcomplicate it. And I think customers appreciate that when you come in and you're like, look,
mhm,
this is how we're thinking about it. And
mhm,
and I think the way this evolves is, you want to pay for outcomes. It's hard to do purely outcomes based right now, but I think customers are comfortable budgeting anything that's forecastable for like a year or 2 years out, especially in the enterprise. As long as
mhm.
you give them predictability, cost predictability, and then you put safeguards in place, it's still
Mhm.
exploration, but that's the way we've been doing it.
I have so many questions on that. So like I think obviously I totally agree with you on like, uh the company that are like running, working for I guess like a managing $10 million versus like the $1 billion company. Maybe their headcount is like the same, but they are two like they have like two different various like outcomes. But I wonder, so when it comes to like selling it to these like bigger corporations, but I feel like their sales cycle could be a lot longer. And I guess like also for the revenue cycle or like I guess like sales cycle, it's like maybe very different. So like is there like a specific date that like people process payment every year? Or is there like some sort of like sales strategy to, for example, do you do top down or like do you have to convince like the people who are actually using this like software to like actually buy in first? Um, how do you think about I guess like your own like go to market motion within the the company?
I think
Oh, yeah.
it's twofold, Grace. I appreciate the question because I think pricing is one aspect of it. Because like, how do you get them comfortable? The who buys the software, like our customers range from public companies down to like Series A, B companies, right, in terms of
Mhm,
size.
mhm,
And I think they buy very differently, right? And you're talking to
mhm,
different levels within the organization. the longer sales cycles that come with enterprise. Also, I think, if you can help them de-risk the investment by doing some sort of a paid pilot engagement and setting a scope around it, and also being very prescriptive about how we help. Like we hired, Mac, who's on the team. He's an AI field engineer. Once again, this whole FDE hype, but it was literally someone that we can deploy on the project alongside someone that's more functional, so that we can make sure that we're properly extracting the use cases from business. We're setting the right objectives that are optimized to some sort of revenue outcome. And then we pursue that and we report back on it. And we form the business case while we do a paid engagement. So that helps de-risk it and make a bigger investment. So it's a longer sales cycle, but that's one motion. And I think, we're pretty fortunate that we get a good, steady, healthy inbound flow, because we're number one in the category for RFP software, since that was our legacy back in 2023 on G2 when it comes to ease of use. So that puts us in a lot of consideration sets, and that's been a great source. Those are quicker sales cycles, though, right? Because there's someone looking for the software, tends to be more mid-market companies, and they've already got established budget. They know how to buy this stuff. They're just looking for something 10 times better. So that's us. Two sales motions, but enterprise, I think it's more deliberate in-network kind of sourcing opportunities. And it's also been great because in the last 2 years, we've built the product that's now ready to deploy at the largest companies, right? And that gives us the opportunity to prove ourselves in a pilot. And yeah, we're all about like showing product and kind of putting it in the hands of people, because customers love it.
I wonder, maybe we can talk about like the or like team building side. So like when you first like started your own company, obviously I'm sure you will be building. And how do you think about like the first hire of the company for your own company?
The first hire was an obvious one for us because we didn't have any engineers. I mean, I have engineer pedigree, but I would not call myself a very good engineer. So that was kind of the first, like, hey, let's build out the core kind of engineering team. So I think every founding team has like a different set of skill set, and then you kind of look for the gap, and then you figure out how to bring them on board. And folks have different circumstances, right, in life. So sometimes you need funding before you can do that. Sometimes you bring people on early on, and they're okay with equity. So for our journey, like, that we needed to kind of bring on some engineering folks, and Tim and Daniel, who are some of our founding engineers, are kind of the core folks that we brought on as the first people. Another interesting inflection point was, at what point do you bring in your first sales hire, right? And for us, that was Brett, who was our account executive, one of them, and he's been phenomenal. But that was also at a point where we had enough customers kind of telling us like, hey, this product has been great. We're getting testimonials. Then it's a question of like, hey, how do I find 100 more customers like that? Right? As the product evolves and we start going into enterprise, like how do we do that as well? So that's kind of been the philosophy. And now, given the growth rate of the company and the amount of customers we're onboarding on a weekly basis, it's just very clear you need more support to scale the customer success and operations. So we're super excited because we just brought on our COO, Caesar, and he's been great because he's done this at a startup before, and he was at Salesforce before that. So I think, Grace, it's like a journey of like assembling the right Lego blocks at the right time. And it's just awesome to be surrounded by like amazing talent, right? As you're able to build this together.
For sure. I wonder, so like, for example, I feel like you guys obviously beyond the Salesforce, there's like a lot of like great logos, especially the very hot AI ones like Decagon or a bridge. So why don't we talk about like, I guess like as a CEO, like how do you prioritize the different leads, and then how do you approach like building the relationship with these like tier one brands? Because I feel like a lot of people may try to like win their business, and I guess like how do you kind of like think about like navigating these like very, I guess, like critical client relationships?
I genuinely believe, and this is something that I've grown to appreciate working with what I consider to be like the best salespeople in the industry when I was at Salesforce. I've seen them operate, and what I've learned through that, because I'm an engineer at heart, but I've kind of learned the other side, which is I think been very beneficial. I always operate in the consultant mindset, right? Like I'm here to help you get value out of the thing that you're looking to solve or looking to buy. And unless I can help you get value out of it, like there's no business in us talking. So I take that approach to every conversation. I think from a, like, speaking specifically to the logos, you know, some of these are opportunities that surface because someone is looking for us. It's word of mouth or a customer referral, which has been great as a lead source. But when they come in, then we think deliberately about who in the company should be mapped where. My team is amazing at like pulling me in at the right level, at the right conversations. So that's been good. But I always take the approach of like, hey, like, you know, being a CEO myself, trying to grow this company, I know what problems you're probably facing. So it's like, here's how I'm thinking about it. And one of the things we love doing is we dog food our products so much. Literally just pull it open and show them like, here's how I prepared for this call. Here are all the things that I did. I think it might be useful for you, right? Once again, like, what are your actual challenges? What do we use it for? What would you like to use it for? And finding the intersection of those is kind of how we approach it.
How do you decide on like what feature to build? And like, so how is it different from like, I guess like using the traditional like ChatGPT and stuff in the background? So I'm sure there's like a lot of guardrails for different like limitations, because like you don't want the employee to know too much sometimes. I guess like, how do you think about the security side as well as like beyond the traditional technology at these like mega multimodal firms? Like what are something that you use to like improve the accuracy or let's say like the security for the product?
Yeah, so I think, you know, we always talk about this like ChatGPT, Claude, these are all like single player. And I know they offer like corporate accounts and you've got ways to like get people together, but ultimately, how can we think about making this truly more collaborative across employees? So for example, one of the things I showed you was the example of how I created that deck. We have essentially an asset catalog that you can publish that, and then anybody in the company can pick it up and create their own version of that, right? So that's one example of a workflow that you're sharing with folks. I think the other part of this is you don't want your people to be amazing prompters, right? Like it's going to be very hard to expect everyone to have that. So how do we make it easy for them to just literally hit a button and get executed, or even schedule it in the back end and have it do more background work for them? So that's kind of from a product, like how do we decide what features, like make it more easy for the user to get value out of the product, right? Now on the security front, you know, the way we think about it is the users of the system will all be scoped to some level of access. Depending on what systems we connect to, we can kind of organize that data in a way that it's only accessed by the right people or the processes that they serve, right? So I think that's an expectation enterprises have, and you just kind of have to do it. So we do. But I think the other interesting thing is, you know, when you think about usability, once again, the investment in making it conversational and then bringing the UX into the conversation has been a good one, because it just makes the product way stickier, right? People are already there as opposed to expecting them to go somewhere else. I think a lot of companies, you know, and there are a lot of ones out there that are kind of rethinking legacy apps, but they're building a new UX underneath the hood. That new UX has got some agentic workflows and doing some awesome stuff, but you're still making them go into a different system, right? And if you're talking to a big company, I'm sorry, you're not decommissioning like 5 systems that exist and then putting yours in. You're doing some type of cutover, right? And I've done like SAP projects more than a decade ago. Like it takes a long time for change management and everything to settle in. So you really have to like find a way to live within what already exists and inject yourself into the workflow for it to get adopted virally. And that's how we've thought about it, right? Like mimic the security, make sure you meet the minimum requirements, but also integrate into the existing workflow.
I wonder, so like, how do you manage your own day-to-day as a CEO? So like, I'm sure you have to work on the product, to fundraise, to talk to customers, and like really, you know, encourage the team to do the right things. And like, how do you kind of like actively like prioritize the most important thing?
It's hard. And I don't think I'm going to have the silver bullet in doing it right. I'm learning. But I think, look, we all have our, I'd say, places of energy that you get kind of like energy from, and then the places that you don't, and it costs you energy. I think about it as like, that's true of everything in life. I would say I'm mostly introverted, but if you ask a lot of my colleagues and friends, they'll think I'm extroverted, but really I'm not. It costs me energy to do that. In a similar way, I think if you break down the tasks, I kind of have to do all the stuff that other people may not be good at, right? And that changes over time. But I really look at it as like I'm the last line of defense, and I have very capable people that are amazing that take a lot of things off my plate. But there are always going to be things that show up that maybe I need to pick up because no one else can do it. So like, what are those things? And identifying those bottlenecks and then tackling them is hard. Right? And it's like, it takes thought. And I try to do that in the weekends and like figure out like, what is it that this week I can have the most impact while I let the team sing and shine because they're doing an amazing job. So that's been good, but I don't think it's perfect. And then, look, I still, I still enjoy coding. And I think with everything that's going on right now, it's been very exciting to see like the ability to very quickly stand up POCs and play around with the tech. So I try to fight the allure to do that and waste a lot of time and focus on the things that drive the business. So it's just that balance.
I wonder, so like when it comes to like after you land a customer, how do you like make them stay? Just because I feel like nowadays, like every day there's like a new tool for everything. So like obviously I think like the larger enterprise are harder to sell in, but like harder to like switch as well. Like so the stickiness is there. But I guess like how do you do I guess like the post sale report since like you're an expert, like you started your career in post sale, like I think like to demonstrate the usage or like I guess like demonstrate the outcome, like obviously you guys have put like the I guess like the hours that you guys both save for the company or, but I guess like what are some ways to kind of like analyze these things and then reflect it in like a very powerful way for the user to like actually feel the impact?
Yeah, we've thought a lot about this. I mean, beyond the actual feeling of aha, like the magical moment of, oh my God, this did something otherwise it would just take me so much time. I think there's that you collect. And look, we're all like, we get wowed with something, and then within weeks, we're like, that's the baseline expectation. And it's like, it doesn't impress me anymore. And I'm now mad that it didn't do what it did. Right? It's like my expectations just go way up. I think you need to come in and you need to basically find what are the use cases that are going to really push the needle on the business so people feel like they're getting value. And that's part of what we really focus on after we get a customer stood up, right? Like what can we do to help you out? And look, it's different depending on the size of customer and the time they can also spend with us and invest, right? So we'll work with the larger ones, which are kind of asking us to come help them shape what this looks like and rolling it out. And sometimes the smaller ones, especially the tech native ones, they're kind of like, look, we know what we're doing. Like, this is great. Like, we got the tech, we're happy to go with it, and we're going to do what we need to do. But we try to do two things. One, be very high touch where it's needed and help them transition from the old way of doing it to the new way and help them identify use cases. And then I think the second piece is how much can we do in the product itself? Like, can the product surface the value that it's bringing at the right altitudes, right? We think about leadership, we think about first and second line managers, and then we think about the individual contributors. And how can the product surface those insights to the people so that they understand what they're getting out of it, right? And that's a little bit of the gamification of like, how, you get this from a lot of companies, right? You get to digest emails and like an overview of how people use the product. We have a part of the product called Tribbleitics, and that's really the meta-analysis of how the product is being used. But we think about the value as like, hey, how much, how many questions have we answered or helped create assets? Like, we can do that kind of stuff. But then the more interesting stuff is, how many times did we not answer a question, right? And what does that mean from a content perspective? Like, what do you need to go build, right? What are the most cited assets? Like, why isn't product marketing building out more of those? What are the top requested features and RFPs that you've lost? Why don't you give that back to product management, right? So there's like the deeper first and level insights that we also mine that we can play back. So I think all of this forms the stickiness for adoption, right? Like, you want to become something you can't live without.
For sure. I wonder when it comes to like fundraising, obviously you guys have done such an amazing job. Like maybe we could talk about like the early stage of fundraising, because like I feel like before you have like a fully functioning product, like do you, so like we had like founders on our show that like they basically like said that like, you know, they landed X amount of like contract signed, but like I feel like for earlier stage startups, like it's like, are actually really hard to land the big brands at the very beginning. Like how do you think about like at what benchmark that you started like to fundraise, and then like what kind of like benchmark that you have to hit to kind of like maintain a certain like milestone to like continuously do well in terms of you know, raise enough funding to actually help the product to grow effectively.
Yeah, I think it's a journey for me. Like this is the first time I've started a company, so I learned a lot in the last 2.5 years. I think the first one, people are making a bet on you as a founder, right? Like it's very early. We had some prototypes. There's still something called Tribble Classic that's out there that I hope no one ever sees. There's stuff that you can put together, but you're really at that point showcasing the vision, and people are betting on you and your ability to execute. I think that first round really comes down to like, what is it that you're going after? Who is the team that you're likely going to assemble, and what's your pedigree, right? And I think your valuations like depend on this, right? Like you see some very famous ex-CEOs that come out and they raise on a pre-seed of valuations of hundreds of millions. I mean, you see countless numbers of these guys. Like that's obviously on the pedigree, right? So I think like early stage, there's a lot of that at play. If I had to do it over again, like I think it's how do you optimize for that if you're raising without a product. But it helps to have traction. It helps to have customers that are saying, yeah, this is a real problem and I want to co-design it with you. So for us, having design partners early on was really useful, right? We had interest from larger customers, and for us, it was larger customers to begin with, right? So UiPath was one of our earliest design partners, which was awesome. So I think, and subsequent funding, for me, I always look at it as like, if I take $1, how do I turn it into 10, and what's the path to that, right? So it's less about like the valuation and the amount being taken. It's more, what exactly does this unlock for us from a revenue standpoint? If I work backwards, what are the investments I need to make to get to that revenue, right? And that's a developed thing, right? Like I didn't think like that 2.5 years ago, but now it's like very obvious that that's how it should work. And that's how we think about funding too, right? So it's like, if I do bring someone on, then what is the amount that allows us to unlock the next tier, and when is the right time to take it for the company? That's the tough stuff to figure out.
For sure. What is something that you feel like you've learned since you started the company?
It's probably a book that I could write. But what is the most useful thing? I think I've really learned to appreciate how important it is to have the right team around you and how it helps you scale. I've led large teams historically. I think when you have just a few people and you're just banded together and you're going up against the world and you're going up against like very well-funded companies, and essentially you're out in the forest and you're on your own. The right people around you make all the difference in terms of what kind of impact you can have, right? And how much leverage you can get. And I think what I've learned is like finding the right people, bringing them on, and helping them give you that leverage unlocks like a completely new tier of productivity. I think in a big company, you can do that as well. But sometimes your existential risk isn't there that drives and motivates you, right? Where you feel it when you're outside. So I think it helps kind of decision-making and also learning rapidly. So for us, like that's kind of, at least for me, it's been one of the biggest learning. Like how do you make the right bets on the right people?
For sure. Speaking of, I feel like building the team / like hiring. So like, I guess like, where do you think like your best talent are coming from? Like, do you have to manually poach like I'm sure, like, I feel like the first few employees, probably you have to manually poach them from somewhere. But I guess like, is there like a particular place where the top talents are coming from? Is it like earlier stage startups, or are they typically coming from like a company that is like a Salesforce? Or like, how do you think about the talent pool in general in the AI era?
I'll give you an example of something, and this is also another learning. So I'll answer your question from before as well as this one. Very early on, like in 2023, I remember at one point we're like, oh, we need to make an executive hire for like a VP of AI.
Mhm,
Like we're doing an AI company, so we need someone with that title. That's
mhm.
what are they going to do? Well, oh, they're going to do all like the AI stack
AI
stuff, right?
stuff.
Like all the, keep abreast of everything new, all the new papers coming out, architecture, feed that back into the head of engineering, and make sure we're like properly architecting this thing so it lasts longer than 5 years, right? Because the rate of change is crazy. And then very quickly we realized, like, hey, like actually no, everyone, like if you're touching the product, like you should know this stuff because it's
Mhm,
changing so fast. There are no like pre-established domain experts in every part of the stack. Sure, like expertise and domain expertise and being in the field for many
mhm,
decades helps you make really good decisions and probably assimilate this stuff faster,
mhm,
but it's not a hard prerequisite. Like really good engineers can learn how to use this and be very good.
mhm,
So that was a learning for us, and also kind of opened up the how do we think about talent? Because initially it was like, well, do we have to hire in San Francisco? It helped that our first two engineering hires were in Toronto because we very quickly realized that's a great hub, and I'm originally from there. So,
mhm,
like one of the learnings for us is like, hey, we can run most of our engineering team out of that location, and a lot of the team is actually from Toronto right now, right? From an engineering product standpoint.
mhm,
And I think we'll continue to invest over there. But I think the real learning was, hey, like you've just got to really find folks that are hungry, willing to learn,
mhm,
given that there's just so much new stuff coming out, right? And that's probably the clearest indicator for success, rather than
mhm,
domain expertise for 20 years. As
mm. For sure. Speaking of like keeping up with I guess like what kind of AI tool do you guys use internally to make yourself more like fast and efficient?
Yeah, I'm like obviously going to plug in our product because I to an annoying level use Tribble within Tribble,
Mhm,
and that's frankly why we always like Caesar calls it Tribble on Tribble. Like we used to do this at
mhm,
Salesforce, Salesforce on Salesforce. Like you go into a meeting, you show them how you're using your product. We can do that because we use this every single day for all
mhm,
parts of our operations, especially in go to market. Um, other other products that we use, we'll have subscriptions to all the big kind of providers to stay abreast of
mhm,
what's coming out, especially when a foundation model drops.
mhm,
And we just did a systems inventory today, right? So I think one of the interesting things is um, some of the new tools that are popping up, uh,
mhm,
for SEO, migrating now to essentially like, I think they're calling
mhm,
it GEO. I don't know what it's called, but companies like Profound, for example, like thinking about
mhm,
how you show up in search results in the
mhm,
LLM itself as opposed to being on Google. Um, there are many capabilities like that we've kind of thought about. But yeah, tooling wise, you've got your regular go to market systems like Salesforce, System of Record, right? We use Gong internally for our meeting transcription.
mhm,
We connect to those systems as well. So everything we're using, we're also somehow interconnected with Tribble, which is
mhm.
cool. So that's been, yeah, that's kind of how we're looking at the stack. And then you got the more less exciting stuff like Jira and all that kind of thing.
Mm.
That's how we think about using tooling. But then AI specifically is literally the LLM providers or Tribble.
What are I guess like when you're thinking about the landscape, like maybe if you could walk us through like how does the entire go to market tool competitive landscape kind of look like? It doesn't have to be your like direct competitors or anything, but I guess like what are some, let's call it like three main trends that you're seeing in the space in general?
Yeah, I think it's evolving so fast, right? I think the
Mhm,
category lines are blurring. Um,
mhm,
Once again, for us, what's interesting is when we integrate to some of these systems and we're becoming the front end for that data, then
mhm,
people will spend more time interacting with us in the conversational interface as opposed to going to the
mhm,
other. If you asked me this question 2 years ago, a lot of
mhm,
the time we were going up against the legacy players in the space that have been around for more than 10
mhm,
years or 8 years or
mhm,
so. And it's because the way that they built the software at the time was it was like project management software for humans
mhm,
to manage the process, right?
mhm,
And now it's literally like you give us work, we finish the work and give it back, right? It's like digital BPO almost, right?
mhm,
That's what an agent is. It gets the job done for you. Um, that's expanded now because the number of systems we connect to and the kinds of work we can do are broader. So
mhm,
initially, we looked at RFP as a category, and then we have competitors there. Then we've got now I would say like sales enablement, which is a pretty big category, but anywhere you're housing knowledge, making that knowledge more accessible through a tool like ours, it kind of also makes them a little bit of a competitor, right? Because now that's no longer the interface. The new interface is the AI. And I think that as you expand the integrations and the systems you connect to, if you can finish more of those units of work in your platform, then that also becomes competitive, right? So I think these category lines are blurring between systems, because if you go and look, like if I literally type in agent in LinkedIn, every freaking company has now like a new agent that we've launched on top of their product, right? But the fun exercise I like to do is I like to go to Wayback Machine, the archive of the internet, and just go and look at some of the websites of companies, maybe 2 years or 3 years back, to like understand what they truly were doing before this. And it gives you kind of this perception on like, what is it that they're automating with the AI, and how does that differ from what you're trying to do, right? So that's kind of how we think about it.
How do you actually create goals for your own organization from product to sales? Like, as a CEO, I feel like you have to basically either approve people's KPI, or, you yourself have like some sort of like KPI for people. How do you kind of like start setting up these goals, or like, measure your growth benchmark versus others? Just because I think AI moves very fast, and like there's like no sustainable growth target, or like not sustainable, like a sustainable goal for like things to happen, because of like everything moves in a different speed these days. So how do you kind of like set KPIs for your own team?
Yeah, I think even though the rate of change is really high of the technology, and kind of things are coming out at a really fast speed, I think the ability for organizations to absorb this stuff is like probably tapering at some, asymptote, right? Like it's not as though you're changing the behavior of a 25,000 person company because foundation model release cycles have gone from like 6 months to 3 months. Now, more people will touch the product and understand what's capable, but you still have to mold yourself to the organization and figure out how you can plug in. So I think there's a natural latency there that you have to think about, like when you're selling to larger companies, and then how you can consult and guide them through that process, right? So I think that's been beneficial, because even though this stuff changes, then you can set objectives around that, right? Like it's not as though you don't have to change, I think, kind of how you think about the year. But of course, you should change how you think about the product roadmap. If GPT-5 drops and there's like 3 emergent capabilities that may make your product better, then you probably want to prioritize integrating that and testing it, right? And that's a bet we made very early on. Like when new foundation models drop, how do they very quickly, get integrated into the stack and make the product better across multiple dimensions? And we've seen that happen in like 2 generations already, only 2 years, right? Which is amazing. So I think roadmap can stay kind of like defined for the year, but be very flexible on it, because you're literally on a surface that's moving constantly in real time. And being small allows you to be agile, so you have to take advantage of that. But revenue targets you can set and you can still march towards, right? You should, like, yes, you can adjust guidance based on maybe a few bad months, but you still aggressively pursue it. And I think the same recipe, like you get in front of customers, you be good partners to them and consult with them and help them through the change that's coming, and really kind of inform your roadmap based on what they're looking to do with you, and partner with them for the long term. And if you follow that, then you can probably build some predictability from a revenue and outcome standpoint. But your roadmap should stay flexible.
For sure. What are some, I guess, like advice that you have for the people who are currently trying to start their own company, pivoting from like a big tech company like Salesforce?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give myself like 10 years ago is just do it. Like, just you'll figure it out. Like, I think there's a, there's probably 1,001 reasons why you shouldn't do this. But if you are at a point where you're even thinking that this might be possible, if you've got the circumstances in life around you, and once again, this comes back to my lovely wife, like if she was not supportive of this, I would not be doing this. So I think if you've got those kind of support systems and you can go and make the investment in yourself, the worst case scenario is you learn so much and you can go back to what you were doing and probably get paid more because you left the company and came back.
I love that. What would you say are like the things that I guess like surprised you since you kind of like started off on your own?
I've been surprised by, I would say, I've been pleasantly surprised by how much people are willing to help.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, it's not a knock on people that I just assumed that, like, I didn't want to bother people or I wouldn't want
Yeah,
to ask.
yeah, yeah.
I
Mhm,
think folks are just generally like very, especially with the network you build over the years, like people are
mhm,
willing to help and lean in, right? And I
mhm,
think if you can also get them involved in the journey somehow,
mhm,
it's awesome because it's like a two-way street, right? Like
mhm,
they help you, and then you can also give them something back, right, as a result of
mhm,
helping you. So that's been awesome, and I've been pleasantly surprised by that.
mhm,
Um, and I would say on the inverse side, I think I've learned an appreciation for how difficult it is to get that first dollar of revenue when you don't work at a big company,
mhm.
right? And it wasn't surprising. I always knew it was difficult, but like it takes it takes a lot, and being able to learn that firsthand has been
Mhm.
awesome.
I always wonder, so like how do you think about like when like the big companies like they're like kind of like self-running and then each employee, let's say they bring in like millions of dollars, maybe they got like like a salary. So how do you think about the revenue structure that kind of like helps the employee to like basically like motivate them to deliver a great result. And since like I feel like from building up your own team, like how do you think about like the comp structure, like the motivation structure for like the core team members?
My thoughts on this are, if you're joining an early stage company where there's a crazy amount of risk, then you want a
Mhm,
piece of the upside, and
mhm.
that's why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Um, so that's one like clear way to
Mhm,
model it, which is,
mhm,
you make it dependent on upside, and you also model it against outcomes for the company, right? Like, hey, if we get to these metrics, then we'll all win together, and this is how we should structure our comp as a result.
mhm.
I think the other thing, then, if you ask some of the tribblers, as you will, uh,
Tribblers.
they they love the tech we're working on in the team, right? So I
Mhm,
think there's a motivation of like, how much autonomy do you have to work on the bleeding edge and to bring like novel new ideas without them being
mhm,
shut down because you're part of a bigger machination. And I've lived
mhm,
that world, right? Like,
mhm,
you're you have many masters to please, if you will, in terms of like what you can and can't
mhm,
do. And here, there's a lot more liberty, and I think
mhm,
there's a refreshing aspect to that. And some of the engineers on the team, they love that, right? Because they're
mhm,
like, you see an academic paper drop or a study or an eval,
mhm,
and there's code in production, and that can happen within the time scale of days.
mhm,
Can't do that at a big company. So that kind of agility, I think, is attractive to folks. So I think you combine that with, proper tethering to outcomes, that gets people excited, and folks that have
mhm,
worked at a startup before tend to know this, right? And that's why they're attracted to this.
mhm. I want to be mindful of the time, and I'm gonna throw like a 30-second fire off at you. What's your favorite book?
The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to my dinner party?
Mhm.
Uh, hmm. People that are alive.
It's your party.
Okay, if I can invite dead people, I think famous physicists like Richard Feynman. It'd be interesting to have like
Mhm.
a Jeff Bezos and a Musk there, and that would be interesting discussion. And then, uh, yeah, I think maybe some artists would have to think about that. That's a tough one.
Love that. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Biggest impact in my career. Hmm. This is a tough one. I would say some of the early folks that I worked with uh, at Salesforce that allowed me to kind of see the sales side of the house. So leadership that gave me opportunities.
Mhm.
I won't name specific names, but I think they know who they are.
Where can we find you outside of work?
Before moving to Florida, out in the water. I really picked up surfing and enjoy it. But otherwise, with my newborn son, who's 9 months old, and spending time with him and his lovely mom.
Love. Congratulations again. Thank you so much, Sunil, for coming on the show today. It was such a lovely conversation.
Thank you for having me. This was great, Grace.
Let me quickly end stream.